Kia ora, welcome. My name is Stephen Parish. I'm the Chief Information Officer in Taranaki District Health Board. Today I'm going to be talking to you about doing more with less and share a case study on how we've done that. Ultimately, healthcare in a position now where we're continually doing more with less because of the underinvestment in health for some time. But that's what we do. We're public sector. We just make the most of what we can. I'll share my screen. So just a bit about me. Who am I? So I am a clinical geek, and I'm quite proud of that. I fell into technology through nursing, and I have 25 years in health, 20 years in health IT. So yeah, it makes me old, but that's okay. I'm okay with that. And I have worked globally, but really now it's about focusing locally. I'm a Kiwi, and even though I spent a lot of years overseas, I really believe in doing something that gives back to the country of my birth, which is what I'm doing now. And so a bit about Taranaki District Health Board. We are in Taranaki. New Plymouth is the main base hospital, and then we have another hospital in Hawera, so we've got over 2,000 staff. We are part of the Te Manawa region, and we're about 13% of the population of that region, and the region covers the middle of the North Island, so includes Waikato, Bay of Plenty, Lakes, Tairāwhiti, and Taranaki. Today, I really want to share with you a bit about what health is about. Where do we start on this journey? How do we prove it could work? Give you that example, a recent example, show what we learned, and look at what's next. So ultimately, healthcare is a complex organisation, and that's shown by these pictures. These are how we currently store a lot of data or information, and this is on paper, which paper is inherently quite difficult to manage and to digitise. But we partially digitise our records, we partial scan, which creates data points, but we don't have a good or a full, complete record at the moment that's digital. This shows the complexity. So on the left-hand side, we have a 70-year-old patient, and that is their entire record. That's all their presentations over their lifetime in Taranaki. So that's multiple volumes, a lot of paper for that one individual. And then on the right-hand side, we have another 70-year-old, but that is their record. So as you can see, it can be quite simple or quite complex. And that's the issue with the data that we've got in healthcare. It's quite challenging to ensure that we can make the data talk for us and work for us. So healthcare, in summary, is a data-rich sector already. We have lots of data. The issue is it's on paper, which is a big challenge. And then that means the issue for us is how do we access the data to make it work for us? Right now, we partially scan, we partially digitize, but it means that part of our record is not available for any analytics. So because of that, we started in 2015 and we started to look at how are we going to go and do some of our analytics. And it began with a vision. So we had a vision that basically outlined that we wanted to make data work for us. We wanted decision-making around the data that we had, as opposed to based on gut feeling or what people have in their heads. We wanted to make it quite specific and around the data. The good thing for us is the executive bought into the strategy, which is always a positive. You don't go very far if the executive doesn't buy into the strategy. And that strategy turned into a detailed plan for us to action, which was really good. So within the strategy, there were some key areas that we looked at. And when we started looking at the people or the resources around the organization that dealt with digitalization and with data, we realized that they're all doing something different. They all had different roles and different functions, but we needed them to do the same thing. So we consolidated those resources, or most of those resources, into the analytics team within IT. So we became the owner, I guess, of data analytics around the organization, with the exception of planning and funding, because they mainly worked off reporting, and so they kept their core function within their team, although they still did use the technology that we built. We also aligned resources to key business areas. So I'll show you on the next slide, but we really very much went to the business and said, what are the main areas that you need help with? And we ensured that our resources were focused on those areas. We developed a plan, and we had quite a detailed plan with multiple phases to get this underway and happening. We did a market assessment of a data visualization tool. So we chose Power BI after doing a lot of research, but that was worked well for us. We're on the on-prem version at the moment, looking at the cloud version, but mainly staying with on-prem because it has more functionality currently. We maintain a data warehouse, which is SQL-based. We haven't gone down the Hadoop path or any of those sort of technologies as yet, but it is looking like we may need to do that in the future. And then we selected an area for pilot, which was really important to get the right area so that we can help them understand their data. So this is how we split the team. On the right-hand side, you'll see that there's the pictures of all the team members. The bottom three are more technical, so they do all the technical work of bringing the data into the warehouse or the initial review of that data. And then the rest of the team is focused on the different functional areas of the organization. So on this org chart, the black silhouettes are where people are focused. But that's not just one person, you know, across things like workforce, human resources, and finance, we have 2 FTE that look after that area because that's a real challenge for us to understand all the workforce data that we've got. But for most areas, there's at least one. We do pair them mostly to ensure that there's a primary and a secondary, so there's some cover and overlap should someone be on leave or not be available for a period of time. So the key areas for us is, because we're a hospital, focus on the clinical areas, also focus on multi health because that's really important to ensure that we deal with equity. But the other big area, as I said, is human resources, workforce, and finance, so around payroll. Public health planning and funding, they have their own team. That's they do their own thing, but as I said before, using our tools. So then we went about proving it could work. We did agree on a pilot area. Now, we chose an emergency department because there was good standards around what data they should have and how they should use their data. That was really important. We also agreed on a business sponsor, and for this, the Chief Operating Officer was our sponsor. She was wanting the outcome. She struggled with the process that we went through, and so she did delegate the responsibility to one of her managers. Probably word of warning, that didn't work well for us because what the Chief Operating Officer wanted as an outcome and what the individual in the emergency department wanted were quite different, and they didn't really communicate well. So at the end, we delivered an outcome that the department wanted, but the Chief Operating Officer didn't see as success. So we've had to go back and review that based on what the Chief Operating Officer really wanted. So the learning there really is to, you know, keep the sponsor close and over communicate if you can, and try and get their perspective of what they wanted, even though they might have delegated. We then analysed existing data needs and processes. As I said, there were quite key data standards in ED. Now, the biggest issue for that was the ED didn't understand them. So we ended up becoming the expert within their processes and data needs, which was good for our pilot and our project, but it wasn't good once that stopped, because then it became our problem. And we've had to then push back on the business, and we've got some thoughts of how we're going to operate in the future to ensure that it's better owned by the business. We extracted the data from the key systems into the warehouse and manipulated it, ETL, etc., and got dashboards built. We did a lot of analysis. We analysed. You know, you can't do enough analysis, and that's because, once again, the business didn't really understand the data and the standard, so we had to get really involved in that and really understand it. And then ultimately we delivered the views relevant to the business need, and we're able to show them what their throughput was, what their clinical challenges were, and really show them some insights into their own data in their department. And then we repeated. We went through this multiple times. So that's just how we went about it. But I guess that was a point in time. And what we've done since then is just keep developing, keep moving more things into the data warehouse, keep developing dashboards, keep analyzing the data that we've got, which is really key. But I thought, well, let's give you a recent example, because the ED stuff that I talked about last year is over a year old now. So we want something new. So then I thought, well, what's topical? What could we possibly talk about that would be really exciting and interesting? So I thought, cool, the rugby, Saturday night, we won the Bledisloe, great game. If you're a Kiwi, not so great if you're Australian, but sorry, Aussies, we'll just have to accept that one. But I thought, really, we don't have a lot of data around the All Blacks, but I'd love to put it in the warehouse and run some numbers, but not really pertinent to a healthcare organisation. So I went, well, obviously COVID, we've had a couple of bouts of it now. We've had a lockdown. The world is really suffering because of it. And so that might be a valid example. So in the end, no to the All Blacks, sorry, and yes to COVID, because that's the most recent example we have. So the key thing for COVID is the DHBs are at the forefront of testing and treatment. We are very much leading the way when it comes to dealing with COVID. It is time critical. Data is very important. We can't solve this or help without having the data available to understand what's going on. The collection of data, however, was quite challenging, and I'll go through that in a minute. We needed to influence third parties, and that goes around the collection of data. The need hasn't stopped. It continues to go on. We're still giving data. We're still modifying what we're doing. This is something that we're probably going to be doing for another 12, 18 months. So we had to make sure that we put in really robust processes. And the other thing is, it is very complex. As healthcare is complex, so was COVID-19, and it continues to be so. So what did we have to do? Data was just one aspect. However, we had to set up community-based assessment centres, or CBACs. We had to coordinate between DHB and primary care, because some of the CBACs were within our organisation and some of them were outside, so within primary care. We had to enhance hospital process and facilities. So we did a lot of building work. We put a wall in ICU to make a red zone, a green zone. We put in buildings, or portable buildings within ED, and to enable there to be an assessment area that could have people that have COVID, and then a clean area that have people without COVID. We built the CBAC, so we refurbished our old ambulance bay to be a CBAC on site, which allowed ease of drive in, drive out. We put in extra places in Hawera, our other hospital, as well. So we did a lot of work, and aligned with that was a lot of technology. So we enabled in the red zones video conferencing between red and green zones through Teams. We enabled online forms, and a whole lot of work there, as well as looking at the data. We had to meet the expectations and direction of the Ministry of Health and PM. The challenge was that changed so often, it almost became ridiculous how many changes we're making. The other thing was, you'd think that the Ministry of Health and PM were aligned, but what we found, it was moving so fast that in the 1 o'clock press conference, the PM would say something or raise something or say something was going to happen, and no one in the ministry knew about it until that point. So we'd come out of that meeting and go, right, let's find out what we have to do. And it would take 24 hours for that to be developed and determined by the ministry to then come back to us. So while the expectation of the public was that we were going to do X, the reality was, that we weren't ready to do it, because we didn't know what X was or how to go about X. So that became really challenging. We got better at it over time. Often had to preempt what we thought the Prime Minister was going to say. But it was a fast-moving thing. We then needed to map the data needs and embed it in process. So one of the things we did early on, and it's probably because of my experience in doing these sort of things in natural disasters and that around the world, but our CBACs wanted to do everything on paper. And I thought that was a short-term solution, and we needed it to be based on technology. So I actually got my team to build an online form aligned with the standard that was coming out from the Ministry of Health, so that we were ready, so that we could either do it real time, or we could data entry the paper forms into it, so that we could then pull the data. So we built the form. in a tool that our clinicians and our admin staff use every day, which is our patient admission system called WebPAS. We got the WebPAS form that mapped the data that was in the standard, and then we were able to then pull that into an analytic, and we pre-built the analytic so that all that data flowed into the analytic, and we had something to show when it was needed. And we wanted to also ensure that it was sustainable. So by doing that, it meant that we could easily rinse and repeat, and when the changes came to the standard, we could easily make those changes to the form and then map that through to the analytic as well. So some of the key things that I think were important to our success in this was that I was part of the planning and governance. You know, so often in IT, we're kind of the afterthought, or we get pulled in at the end when they've already decided what they're going to do. And then we come along and be the killjoys that go, yeah, sorry, mate, you can't do that. It doesn't really work for this reason or that reason, or have you thought about A or B? But this time we were part of it from the start, which was really good and really important. We did create a small agile team, both the technical and the analytics team. So we're lucky in that we have an epidemiologist within the team, and she wasn't working as an epidemiologist, she was working as the workforce analyst, but you know, she always wanted to get back into epidemiology, and COVID-19 allowed us to utilize her skills and really allow her to operate at a higher scope of practice, which was really good. So we had two analytic people, two technical people and two analytic people. The technical people really focused on the forms and getting the data into the data warehouse, and the analysts really focused on analysing the data and producing the dashboards so that the incident response team could have access to that data. As I said, we developed the online collection forms. We tied to the NHI, so that's a single node identifier for patients in New Zealand. Also a challenge because that really is only for New Zealand citizens, but we had a lot of people that were being tested for COVID that weren't New Zealand citizens or residents in New Zealand. So we had to work with the ministry for them to create NHIs for all people that came in, not just those that were from New Zealand. We developed the dashboards. We supported the manual collection and data entry. So because I also run medical records and I have admin staff, I reallocated them to do the data entry. So we were pretty much near real time. The forms would come in from the CBACs and from the primary care assessment centres. We would then manually enter it. And sometimes we were about 24 hours behind, but most times we were up to date on the day, which was really good. As I said before, we responded and tried to preempt requirements. You know, I think that was key. The experience of the team, the epidemiologists, my experience allowed us to really understand what might come and put things in place to be ready for if it did. We automated as much as we could. We did have reporting that had to be going to the ministry every morning at 8 o'clock. Initially that was manual. We had to do phone calls around to the various areas, find out what the number of beds are available in ICU overnight, find out whether or not they come into ED for COVID, bring that together and put it into an Excel spreadsheet, upload that into the warehouse, and then have an analytic around that. But ultimately, in the end, we automated that. So we tried to use the sensors coming out of our patient admission system. We tried to ensure that the end users could enter the data onto Island forms in the first thing in the morning, so that then came into the analytics so we could send the data off to the ministry. And then we rinse and repeated. Same thing I've said all through this, is we rinse and repeat, because we have to keep learning and keep developing and keep moving as things change with COVID. So through this, we developed a lot of dashboards, and this is the list of the dashboards that we created. Now, a lot of this were for our incident control group, because we did treat it as not just a THB incident, but we had people from emergency response group in town. We had them from the council, as well as public health and other people involved in this process. And so we had multiple different dashboards that had kind of different focus. So for instance, the lab test intelligence dashboard, that was really around the number of tests we've done, the number of positives, the throughput of the testing, and the actual outcome of that testing itself. The hospital capacity was more around what is our capacity as a hospital, what's our capacity in ICU and ED, so that we knew whether we were being challenged or not with capacity. What we'd found is overseas, ICU and ED were just slammed because of COVID. We were lucky with the approach New Zealand took. We didn't get the high increase of numbers into those areas. However, it still was quite busy for us. So some of the examples of the dashboard. So the CVAC at a glance. So this showed the number of visits that came to the CVACs. This was in August, so quite early days, but it's gone up since then. So we have 41 CVAC visits on this. It showed how many were swabs, how many healthcare workers were swabbed, if we had any at that time. We're still working through the data, so we didn't quite have that data. On the right-hand side there, we showed the map of where people came from, so their suburb, so we could see if there's any clusters and where the people were being tested, which was really good for, once again, it's at a glance. You quickly see what's going on in the CVACs in near real time. Really important for incident controllers and to understand what's going on. The lab test dashboard, as I said earlier, is really around the number of tests that we've done, and it shows the rate on the right-hand side per population. And once again, we mapped it against where they come from, so we could see any clusters. On the left-hand side is more around the ethnicity, Māori versus non-Māori, number of tests being done, percentage, where they're being done, and the population that have been tested. So once again, very important to get that together. The hospital capacity intelligence dashboard, this showed the capacity within the organisation. So total beds, 62% capacity. We had 89 available, 148 occupied beds. Now that was just in base hospital, but we could look at across both base and Hawera and look at how many COVID cases were in there. Now we were lucky, and when this was done, there were no COVID cases, which was great for us. So the outcome for us through this is, yes, there's a lot of work. We were working really long hours to get this to happen, both from a pure technology perspective, but from a data perspective as well. Our epidemiologist was doing, here at 7 in the morning, didn't leave till 8 or 9 at night most days. And she worked 8 weeks straight, 7 days a week, as did most of our team. So it was really quite busy. But the key outcome was the incident controller had near real-time access to accurate data and was able to use that data. Now, she did let us know that it was really good because she would often get media queries at any time of the day or night, and she was able to log on to the dashboard and give them near real-time updates to what was going on in Taranaki. We automated the reporting to the ministry, and so that meant over time it decreased the impact on our team, on my team, but it meant that we're able to meet the expectations of the ministry in the times they wanted it. Some of the turnaround times that the ministry wanted were really challenging for us, but we've managed to do it, and manual process first, but we've quickly moved into automating so that we didn't have the people process in there. We adapted and changed as requirements changed. So key to the outcome of this was we were agile, we worked agile. We ensured that we could, turn on a dime if we needed to and really change what we did. And that was really key to the success. And we maintained a small agile team. In fact, those 4 people, while things have quieted down a bit, they are still involved. They're still able to be pulled back into this if we get another outbreak and they need to be. So that was a key focus on COVID. What did we really learn from that? The key things for us were we had a really good foundation. The work we did before with our strategy, our plan, our previous work in the emergency department, and bringing things into the warehouse gave us a really good foundation for moving forward. And I'd say it's probably around our maturity. We're a lot more mature now as an organisation around the way we use data, the way we adapt to make data part of what we do. So it was really important. The other thing was, when we have a pandemic, there's nothing like a pandemic to focus people. And it allowed for quick decision making, it allowed for prioritization, it gave us that single focus. I don't know about your organization, but for us, we have 20 number one priorities. And when you ask which is the number one priority, they really can't tell us. It's just do your best on all 20. Now, you all know that you can't focus 100% on 20 things at once, But this allowed us to focus really on COVID because that was the one thing that everyone knew and everyone spoke about. But everything was known. We made lots of assumptions, and some of those assumptions came to be true, some of them came to be false. And we just made sure we were agile and adapted quickly to ensure that we could focus and re-look at things and redo things. We also had the right people in the room. Had the epidemiologist in there. We had the executive in there. We had the chief operating officer, the finance people, IT, everyone was involved so that we could help and work together to meet the needs. We did allow people to operate at the highest scope of practice. Really important that we didn't take people off doing what they were really good at and focusing on other things. And we gave them time and support to do their job. We did remove a lot of the noise from other things to allow them to do their work. So those are all key learnings from the COVID experience. So what's next for us? Now, this is about not just COVID, but around our analytics strategy and plan. We will continue to adapt to COVID. You know, it hasn't gone, we're still getting it, we're still seeing it in the community. We had a case in the port last week, which once again allowed us to readapt and rechange what we're doing to focus on the port workers. We need to apply the learnings across other aspects of analytics. So the learnings from COVID, the learnings from our previous work, we need to apply and learn. We are looking at decentralizing the data specialists, but not the analysts, because we believe that we need to maintain a core team of technical and analysts within IT, but we are looking at moving resources and getting more resources to be back out in the business, because the one learning that I didn't say was the ownership of data is a real issue for us. It is becoming IT's problem, all the data issues and the data quality issues, but really it's not. It's got nothing to do with us. All we're doing is taking the business data and helping it or using it to make sense of it. So we believe by decentralizing and pushing people back out into the business that the ownership of that will increase. We're going to review the data warehouse technology and tool sets. We are using SQL. It serves its purpose now, but we know that when we start going into machine learning and decision support more around using the data, that we'll need to be looking at our technology stack when it comes to the data warehouse. We're very happy with Power BI. We're not looking to change that. It works for us. It works really well. We're also going to ingest more data sources. Key to our success is to ensure that all data is available so people can analyze it and can make sense of it. So with that being said, thank you for your time. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions over the next few weeks, or you're going throughout your day and you go, oh, I just want to know about what Taranaki did and how they went about it. Happy to share, happy to have a conversation. So reach out to me via email, and then we can tee up a time to talk and have a call. But thank you for your time, as I said, and have a great day.